The Siege of Uvara Prime. A fateful encounter. The once pristine sky of Uvara Prime had turned a menacing shade of grey as the acrid scent of burning wreckage and scorched earth filled the air. What was once a peaceful agricultural colony had become a smouldering war zone, with humanity desperately defending its foothold against the relentless advance of the Jorak, a brutal alien race. Sergeant Josh Fallon, his face smeared with dirt and blood, crouched behind the shattered remains of a transport vehicle, gripping his plasma rifle tightly. His heartbeat thundered in his ears as he stole a glance over the jagged edge of the wreck. The landscape was littered with bodies, both human and Jorak, spread across the scorched ground like forgotten dolls. Smoke from burning crops mixed with the smell of death, and the once vibrant fields were now a battlefield where survival was a fleeting hope. The rhythmic pulse of alien plasma rounds streaked through the air, the harsh light cutting through the thick smoke that obscured the battlefield. Each shot struck closer, forcing Josh and his remaining squad members deeper into cover. He could feel the heat of the blasts on his skin, could hear the strained breathing of the men and women who had trusted him with their lives. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running low on both ammunition and hope. For hours, the platoon had held the line, buying precious time for the evacuation of the remaining civilians. But now, as twilight fell and the alien onslaught intensified, Josh knew they couldn't hold out much longer. His injured leg throbbed with each passing second, the bleeding wound a constant reminder that his own survival was in doubt. He winced in pain, but forced himself to stay focused. "Keep firing," he shouted over the deafening roar of the battlefield. His voice was hoarse, barely audible over the chaos. Private Jenkins, the youngest in the group, looked up at him with wide eyes, fear etched on his dirt-covered face. Josh gave him a firm nod, hoping to inspire some courage in the young soldier, even as despair gnawed at the edges of his own resolve. Suddenly, the comm system in Josh's helmet crackled to life, a garbled transmission breaking through the static. "Fallon, Sergeant Fallon, do you copy?" Josh tapped his earpiece, his hands slick with sweat. "This is Fallon. Go ahead. Reinforcements are still 10 clicks out. You're on your own for now. Hold the line." The message ended abruptly, leaving Josh with a sinking feeling in his gut. 10 clicks. They might as well have been on the other side of the galaxy. Reinforcements wouldn't make it in time, and the Jorak were closing in. A searing pain shot through Josh's side as a plasma bolt skimmed past him, grazing his armor and leaving a smoking trail. He bit back a scream, his vision blurring for a moment as the world tilted. The adrenaline was the only thing keeping him going, but even that had its limits. The squad was down to 6 soldiers now, their original 20 reduced by constant, brutal skirmishes. Josh could see the fatigue on their faces, the hollow look in their eyes that spoke of exhaustion and the inevitability of death. He couldn't let them fall apart, not now, not when they were so close to fulfilling their mission. "Fall back to the transport," he yelled, waving his hand towards the gutted vehicle behind them. It was their only chance of regrouping, even though it offered little in terms of actual safety. The squad moved in unison, firing sporadically as they retreated, their boots kicking up dust as they ran for cover. As Josh limped behind them, his vision narrowed, the weight of his injuries becoming harder to ignore. The pain in his thigh was nearly unbearable now, but he refused to let it stop him. He had always been a fighter, always the first to volunteer for the toughest missions. He wasn't about to give up, not after everything they'd been through. Just as they reached the transport, a massive explosion ripped through the air, sending Josh and his squad flying in different directions. His body slammed into the ground with a bone-rattling force, his helmet dislodged in the impact. The world around him spun wildly, and for a moment he couldn't tell up from down. He groaned as he pushed himself up on his hands and knees, spitting blood onto the dirt. His ears rang from the explosion, and when his vision cleared, he saw that 2 more of his squad members lay unmoving in the dirt. His heart clenched painfully in his chest, but there was no time to mourn. The Jorak were advancing, their ominous figures looming through the smoke. Josh tried to lift his rifle, but his arm refused to obey, the weight of it too much for his failing body. His head swam, and he collapsed back against the side of the transport, struggling to keep his eyes open. Is this how it ends? He wondered dimly as the world around him seemed to slow, the cacophony of battle fading into a distant hum. His vision blurred, the edges darkening as unconsciousness crept closer. Just as he was about to let go, a strange sensation washed over him. His body felt lighter, the pain in his leg and side dulling, as if someone had turned down the volume on his suffering. Was this death or something else? Before he could make sense of it, he felt himself being lifted, gently, carefully, as if by invisible hands. His last thought, before the darkness claimed him completely, was a fleeting hope that somehow, in the chaos of war, they had saved the civilians. Then there was nothing. The doctor's special treatment. Josh awoke slowly, his body heavy and unresponsive, like he was submerged in thick syrup. He struggled to remember what had happened, his thoughts tangled in a fog of pain and confusion. The last thing he recalled was the battlefield, the heat of plasma fire, the agonizing wound in his leg, and the darkness that claimed him after the explosion. But this wasn't the battlefield. The smells were different. The air here was sterile, with a faint hum of machinery that seemed to vibrate in his bones. He blinked against the harsh white light above him, trying to focus. The ceiling was smooth and metallic, crisscrossed with delicate lines of glowing blue. It didn't look like any human medical facility he had ever seen. His body felt restrained, but not by chains or cuffs. More like his limbs were held in place by an invisible force. Panic gripped his chest as he tried to move, but nothing responded. Was he paralyzed? "Relax," came a voice, soft and lilting, almost melodic in its tone. "Your body is healing. Don't try to force it." Josh's heart skipped a beat. That voice. It was calm and soothing, but undeniably alien. He craned his neck to the side, straining to see who, or what, was speaking to him. His eyes widened when a figure stepped into view. The creature before him was tall, elegant, and unlike anything Josh had encountered. Her skin shimmered in a shade of iridescent blue, catching the light in waves. Her eyes were large, almond-shaped, and glowed faintly with a soft amber hue. They seemed to peer into Josh's very soul, filled with both curiosity and wisdom. Her limbs were slender but strong, moving with a grace that felt otherworldly. Around her, the air seemed to shimmer with a faint, glowing energy. Who are you?" Josh's voice cracked as he finally managed to speak, his throat dry. He tried to sit up, but the same invisible force held him in place. His body still wasn't responding properly, though the pain in his leg and side had dulled to a distant ache. "I am Dr. Velith, a Solarian healer," she replied, her voice as smooth as a river stone. "You are aboard a Solari medical vessel. We found you just in time." Josh frowned. The Solari. He had heard of them, one of the many alien races involved in the galactic conflict, but they were supposed to be neutral, neither allies nor enemies of the human forces. What were they doing here, on the battlefield of Uvara Prime, and why had they rescued him? "You saved me," Josh asked, the question coming out more as an accusation than gratitude. His soldier's instincts were kicking in, distrustful, wary of any alien intervention, even if it seemed benevolent. Dr. Velith nodded, her expression unreadable. "Your injuries were severe. You were near death when we found you. But I have administered a treatment unique to my kind, one that your human medicine would not be able to replicate." Josh's eyes darted around the room, taking in the strange, glowing equipment that surrounded him. It was all so foreign, sleek and devoid of any of the harsh edges and tools he was used to in human medical bays. The bed he was lying on seemed to float, suspended in the air by some kind of anti-gravity field. Tubes and wires, glowing with soft pulses of light, ran from his body to the machines around him. And yet, he felt oddly calm. Despite his initial panic, there was no pain, only a sense of deep fatigue. "What did you do to me?" Josh's voice trembled slightly, but his eyes remained locked on Veleth's. She stepped closer, her long, delicate fingers hovering just above his chest. "I used a Solari technique to stimulate your body's regenerative processes. Your cells are repairing themselves at an accelerated rate, but it's not without its complications. Human physiology is not entirely compatible with our methods. You may experience side effects." Josh's heart raced. Side effects? That didn't sound good. What kind of side effects? Veleth hesitated for a moment, as if considering how much she should tell him. "It's difficult to say for certain. Our treatment will heal your wounds, but it might also heighten your senses, increase your strength. However, it could strain your body in ways humans aren't accustomed to." Josh stared at her, trying to process everything. He had been a soldier long enough to know that nothing came without a cost, especially in war. His body might heal faster, but there would be consequences. Still, it wasn't like he had much of a choice. "How long until I can get back on the battlefield?" he asked, his voice firmer now. The war wasn't going to wait for him to recover at his own pace. His platoon needed him. The civilians still needed to be evacuated. He couldn't stay here, in some alien medical pod, while his people were dying. Veleth's expression softened slightly, a flicker of sympathy crossing her features. "Your body needs time to adapt to the treatment. Rushing back into combat too soon could be dangerous. You must rest, Sergeant Fallon." "I don't have time for that," Josh growled, pushing against the invisible restraints that held him down. His frustration boiled over. He had never been one to sit still, and being told to rest while the war raged on outside made his skin crawl. Veleth's eyes flashed with something close to irritation. "If you return too soon, your body could collapse under the strain. You wouldn't survive another fight in this condition." Josh clenched his fists, fighting the rising tide of helplessness. He hated feeling weak, hated being out of control, but the logical part of his brain told him that she was right. If he went back now, he would be a liability to his squad. He needed to be at full strength if he was going to make a difference. "How long?" he finally asked, his voice quiet. 3 days, Veleth said. "After that, we will reassess. For now, I suggest you focus on recovering." Josh let out a slow breath, his body sagging back against the floating bed. 3 days. It felt like an eternity in the middle of a war, but it wasn't as long as he feared. Maybe, just maybe, he could heal enough to get back into the fight. As he lay there, staring up at the glowing ceiling, a thought crossed his mind. "Why did you save me? The Solari aren't involved in this war. You could have just left me to die." Veleth's gaze softened, and she looked away for a moment, as if considering her answer. "We may not be involved in your war, Sergeant Fallon, but that does not mean we are without compassion. We cannot ignore suffering, even if it is not our own." Josh's chest tightened at her words. There was something about the way she said it, the quiet conviction in her voice, that made him believe her. For the first time, he saw her not just as an alien, but as a being capable of empathy, just as human as anyone in his platoon. "Rest now," Veleth said, her voice gentler. "When you wake, we will continue your treatment." With that, she turned and left the room, the door sealing shut behind her with a quiet hiss. Josh lay there in the silence, his mind racing. He had 1,000 questions, but no energy to ask them. As sleep began to pull him under again, one thought echoed in his mind. Who was this doctor really? And what was the true cost of this special treatment? Strength beyond measure. Days passed in the alien medical chamber, and Josh slowly adjusted to the peculiar routines of his new life. His body, that was still weak, began to feel different. The dull ache that had settled into his leg gradually faded, replaced by a sensation he couldn't quite describe, like his muscles were awakening from a long slumber. Each day, Dr. Veleth would visit him, monitoring his progress, her presence a calming influence in the otherwise sterile environment. On the 3rd day, as the first rays of dawn crept through the shimmering walls of the chamber, Josh awoke with an unfamiliar vitality coursing through him. He blinked against the light and felt an unusual warmth radiating from his core. It was as if the treatment was igniting a fire within him, one he had never felt before. "Good morning, Sergeant Fallon," Veleth greeted, her voice melodic as always, but tinged with a hint of excitement. "Are you ready to begin your next phase of treatment?" Josh sat up slowly, the familiar sensation of the invisible restraints lifting. "I feel different," he admitted, flexing his fingers. "Stronger somehow." Veleth nodded, her eyes sparkling with approval. "That is precisely what I hoped for. Your body has responded remarkably well to the regenerative process. However, it is essential that we conduct a series of tests to gauge your new abilities." "What kind of tests?" Josh asked, his curiosity piqued. The prospect of discovering what this new strength could do was thrilling, but it also filled him with a slight apprehension. "Tests that will assess your physical capabilities, strength, speed, reflexes, and endurance. I want to ensure that you can handle the demands of combat once you return to the battlefield," she explained. With a determined nod, Josh swung his legs over the edge of the floating bed. The moment his feet touched the floor, he felt a jolt of energy surge through him, more potent than anything he had experienced before. It was intoxicating. "Let's do this," he said, a grin breaking across his face. He was ready to push the boundaries of what he thought possible. Dr. Veleth led him through a series of expansive, high-tech training rooms that were part of the medical vessel. The space felt almost like a gym, outfitted with alien equipment that looked both advanced and bizarre. Large transparent panels displayed various data, monitoring vital signs and performance metrics in real time. The first test involved strength. Veleth gestured toward a set of large weights, each adorned with glowing symbols. "Lift those. I want to see how much your body can handle." Josh approached the weights, feeling a surge of confidence. He grasped the handles, bracing himself. With a deep breath, he lifted, surprised at how effortless the motion felt. He had been a solid soldier before, but now the weights rose as if they were mere feathers. Veleth watched closely, her expression unreadable. "Very good," she said, her tone approving. "Now, let's increase the weight." They continued with the tests, each one pushing Josh further. He sprinted on a treadmill that adjusted its incline and speed automatically, feeling the rush of adrenaline as he pushed his body harder than he ever had before. The machine recorded his heart rate, lung capacity, and stamina, displaying metrics that constantly impressed Veleth. As the hours passed, Josh could feel the energy within him grow stronger, almost exhilarating. His senses sharpened. He could hear the faintest hum of machinery, the rhythm of Veleth's breathing, and even the distant sounds of the stars outside the vessel. It was as if he had been awakened from a dream, everything around him suddenly vibrant and alive. "Your reflexes are extraordinary," Veleth noted as they moved to the next test. "I will throw these objects at you, and you must catch them." Josh grinned, ready for the challenge. Veleth produced several small, spherical devices that hovered in the air, their surfaces shimmering with energy. She launched them at him with impressive speed, but Josh found himself catching each one effortlessly. He moved instinctively, reacting as if he were dancing, each motion fluid and precise. The thrill of his newfound abilities flooded him with joy. It felt like he could do anything. But as he caught the last sphere, a small voice in the back of his mind reminded him that with great power came great responsibility. "Excellent work, Sergeant," Veleth praised. "Your body has not only healed but evolved. However, you must be mindful. This power can be a double-edged sword." "Double-edged?" Josh echoed, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" "While you have gained physical strength and enhanced abilities, the strain on your body is significant. If pushed too hard, you risk injury or worse," she explained, her expression turning serious. "You must learn to control this strength, not just wield it." Josh nodded, absorbing her words. He had always thrived in chaos, pushing himself to the limit. But now he understood that this wasn't just about survival, It was about responsibility. "I will control it," he promised. "I'll learn to master it." As their training progressed, the bond between Josh and Velith deepened. She was not just a doctor, she was a mentor. She shared stories of her people's own battles, their struggles and victories against oppression. Josh found himself inspired by her strength and resolve, recognizing a shared determination in their fight for survival. Days turned into a week as Josh's training intensified. Each session pushed him closer to the limits of his new capabilities. He was no longer just a soldier. He was becoming something more, a symbol of hope for humanity, a beacon of strength against the darkness of war. But amidst his training, something was troubling him. Josh couldn't shake the feeling that the Solari had a larger agenda. Why had they chosen to intervene? What did they hope to gain from saving him? It was a question that lingered at the back of his mind, gnawing at his focus. One evening, as he prepared for another training session, he confronted Velith. "Why did you save me?" he asked bluntly. "You didn't have to. The Solari aren't involved in this war, so why put yourselves at risk?" Velith paused, her gaze piercing. "Because we have witnessed the devastation of war, and we understand its consequences. Our neutrality does not mean we are indifferent. We have the power to help, and that is a responsibility we cannot ignore." Josh felt the weight of her words. "But what do you gain from this? What's your endgame?" Velith stepped closer, her eyes searching his. "Our goal is not conquest, but understanding. We believe in cooperation, in forging alliances that transcend boundaries. If humanity falls, it could destabilize the balance of power in the galaxy. We are willing to stand with you, to fight for a future where all races can coexist." As she spoke, something within Josh shifted. He had spent so long focused on his own battles, on the survival of his squad and humanity, that he had lost sight of the bigger picture. Maybe this alliance with its Solari could be the key to turning the tide of war. "Then let's work together," he said, his voice steady. "If we're going to win this war, we need to do it as partners. I'll bring my strength, and you bring yours." Velith smiled, a rare, radiant expression that lit up her features. "Then it is decided. Together, we will stand against the darkness." With that, Josh felt a renewed sense of purpose swell within him. He was not just fighting for humanity anymore, he was part of something greater. As the weeks passed, he honed his abilities under Velith's guidance, preparing himself not just as a soldier, but as a leader. His training had transformed him, both physically and mentally, but the true challenge lay ahead. The day finally came when he would return to the battlefield. Velith stood beside him, her presence a source of strength as they prepared to face the enemy together. As he looked into her luminous eyes, Josh knew that whatever awaited them, he was ready to fight for humanity, for their alliance, and for a future where strength could be a force for good. The return to battle. The moment the ship's hatch opened, the chaos of Uvara Prime enveloped Josh once more. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burnt earth. Explosions shook the ground beneath him as he stepped onto the war-torn landscape, his heart racing with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. This was no longer the battlefield he had known. It was a theater of devastation, where every second counted, and every decision could mean life or death. Beside him, Dr. Velith exuded an aura of calm, her eyes scanning the horizon with a sharp focus. The stark contrast between her composed demeanor and the frantic environment around them gave Josh a sense of reassurance. Together, they were a partnership forged in the fires of war, an alliance that had the potential to change the tide of this conflict. "Stay close to me," Velith instructed, her voice steady as they moved forward. "We need to find your platoon quickly." Josh nodded, the weight of his newly acquired abilities grounding him in purpose. He had undergone rigorous training, mastering not just his physical capabilities, but also the newfound insights into his own strength. He could feel the energy coursing through him, a raw power that promised to unleash fury upon their enemies. As they navigated the ruins of what was once a vibrant community, Josh's heightened senses kicked in. He could hear the distant sounds of combat, a mixture of human cries, alien roars, and the rhythmic thud of artillery. His vision sharpened, allowing him to pick out figures moving among the debris, some friendly and others decidedly hostile. "We're close," Josh said, feeling an instinctive pull toward the sounds of his comrades. They had fought valiantly to hold their ground, and he couldn't bear the thought of returning to find them overwhelmed. Suddenly, the ground trembled as a massive explosion erupted nearby, sending debris flying into the air. Josh instinctively threw himself over Veleth, shielding her from the falling rubble. When the dust settled, he quickly rose, scanning the area for threats. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. "I am unharmed," she replied, brushing dust from her skin. "But we need to move. The Zorak are regrouping." They pressed on, weaving through the wreckage until they reached a small enclave where his platoon had set up a temporary defensive position. Josh's heart swelled at the sight of his fellow soldiers, huddled together, determination etched on their faces despite the exhaustion that hung in the air. "Fallon, you made it," shouted Sergeant Harper, one of the few remaining members of his squad, relief evident in his voice. The others turned, eyes widening at the sight of their sergeant alongside the enigmatic alien doctor. "Harper, we need to fall back and regroup," Josh said, his voice cutting through the tension. "The Zorak are coming in stronger than ever. We have to prepare for an assault." "But we're outnumbered," Harper replied, shaking his head. "We've been holding them off, but it's only a matter of time before they break through. What can we do?" Josh took a deep breath, his newfound confidence surging to the surface. "I have a plan, but it requires all of us working together. Veleth has skills and technology that can turn the tide. We can't just wait here to be overrun." The soldiers exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering among them. They had fought hard, lost friends, and witnessed horrors that would haunt them forever. But as they looked at Josh, a fire ignited in their eyes. He was back, and with him came hope. "All right, Fallon," Harper said, his voice steadying. "Let's hear your plan." Josh laid out his strategy, a fusion of human tenacity and Silari technology. "Veleth can enhance our defenses with her medical tech. We can create barriers and fortify our positions. Meanwhile, I'll lead a small team to flank the enemy and draw their attention away from the base." Veleth stepped forward, her presence commanding. "I can amplify your strength and provide support from a distance. With my technology, we can develop makeshift shields to protect against incoming fire." The platoon murmured, the energy shifting as they absorbed the plan. Josh could see the doubt fading, replaced by determination. They would not be victims of this war, they would fight back. As the soldiers prepared, Josh felt the weight of his responsibilities settle on his shoulders. He moved through the camp, speaking with each soldier, encouraging them, reminding them of their strength and unity. Together, they were more than just individuals. They were a force to be reckoned with. "Ready?" he asked as they gathered, adrenaline pumping through their veins. "Ready?" came the chorus of responses, fueled by a newfound sense of purpose. They set to work, constructing barriers using salvaged debris and the Silari technology Veleth had provided. It was a chaotic flurry of activity, but the camaraderie that had once defined their squad was returning. With each passing moment, the bond between them strengthened, solidifying their resolve to protect one another. As dusk approached, the first signs of the Zorak offensive appeared on the horizon. A dark mass of alien soldiers, their grotesque forms silhouetted against the crimson sky, advanced toward the human encampment. "Positions," Josh shouted, adrenaline coursing through him as he took his place at the forefront. The soldiers fell into formation, hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. Veleth stood beside him, her glowing eyes scanning the battlefield, ready to unleash her powers. The Zorak charged, their war cries echoing through the air. Josh felt a surge of energy wash over him, a reminder of the strength he now possessed. As the enemy drew closer, he focused his thoughts, channeling the raw power coursing through his veins. Now, he yelled, unleashing a burst of energy as he charged forward, leading the assault. The ground trembled beneath his feet as he darted toward the enemy, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge incoming fire effortlessly. The first Jorek soldier he encountered was taken by surprise. With a swift, powerful motion, Josh struck, the force of his blow sending the creature sprawling. He could feel the energy radiating from him, amplifying his strength and speed. He was no longer just a soldier, he was a force of nature. Behind him, Velith unleashed her own abilities, sending waves of energy to create shields that absorbed the alien fire. The soldiers rallied, inspired by the sight of their sergeant fighting alongside the alien healer, their combined efforts pushing back against the enemy. Josh fought with a ferocity he had never known, each blow landing with precision and power. He felt invincible, like he could take on the entire Jorek army alone. But amidst the chaos, he also felt a growing sense of responsibility. Each life depended on their collective strength and unity. The battle raged on, dust and smoke swirling around them as the two forces clashed. Josh shouted commands, guiding his squad through the fray, using his agility and newfound abilities to flank the enemy. The Jorek began to falter, their advance slowing as confusion set in among their ranks. "Push forward," he cried, rallying his squad to advance. "We can't let them regroup." They fought relentlessly, the bond between them fortified by their shared struggles and victories. But just as they seemed to gain the upper hand, the ground shook violently, and a massive alien war machine emerged from the shadows, towering over the battlefield. Its metallic limbs moved with an ominous grace, and its weapons glowed with a menacing light. Josh's heart sank. This was no ordinary enemy. This was a commander, a Jorek warlord intent on crushing their resistance. "Fall back," he yelled, recognizing the danger. "We need to regroup." As they retreated, the war machine unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, scattering the soldiers. Velith shouted, channeling her energy to create shields around the squad, but the pressure was overwhelming. They had to find a way to stop this monstrosity. "Velith," Josh called, desperation creeping into his voice. "We need a plan." She nodded, determination in her eyes. "I can disrupt its systems, but I'll need a distraction." Josh grinned, understanding her intent. "I'll draw its fire. You focus on disabling it. Let's end this." With renewed purpose, he charged forward again, drawing the attention of the war machine. It turned, its weapons locking onto him as he darted between its fire, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to avoid the deadly blasts. He could feel the heat of the energy beams grazing his skin, but adrenaline pushed him forward. "Now, Velith," he shouted, knowing this was their moment. Velith unleashed her energy, a brilliant surge of light striking the war machine. Josh watched as its systems flickered and sputtered, the once menacing figure beginning to falter. "Come on," he'd urged, pushing himself to maintain the distraction. With each passing second, the warlord's power waned, the creature growing desperate as it attempted to regain control. Finally, with one last surge of energy, Velith struck the core of the machine. It erupted in a blinding flash, the explosion reverberating across the battlefield. The impact knocked Josh off his feet, sending him tumbling to the ground. As he lay there, dazed but alive, he realized they had done it. The war machine was down. Around him, the soldiers erupted in cheers, the tide of battle shifting in their favor. "Fallon, we did it," Harper yelled, pulling him to his feet. The squad rallied around him, their spirits lifted by the victory. But in the distance, Josh could see the shadows of the remaining Jorek forces beginning to retreat. This was only one battle in a much larger war, but they had proven that humanity, alongside its newfound allies, could rise against the odds. As the dust began to settle and the echoes of battle faded, Josh turned to Velith, his heart full of gratitude. "Thank you," he said, meaning every word. "We couldn't have done this without you." She smiled, a warmth spreading through her features. "Together, we are stronger than we ever could be alone." With the remnants of the Jorek forces scattered and their allies victorious, Josh knew that this was just the beginning. They had forged a bond that transcended their differences, a partnership that could change the course of history. And with each new battle, they would continue to fight for humanity, for peace, and for a future where strength and compassion went hand in hand. An alliance forged in fire. The aftermath of the battle was a landscape transformed. Where chaos had once reigned, silence now hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the distant crackle of fires still smoldering. Josh stood among the remnants of the battlefield, the reality of their victory slowly sinking in. They had pushed back the Jorek forces, but the cost weighed heavily on him. His comrades had fought valiantly, but they had also lost friends, and the scars of war were etched deep in their hearts. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the devastated terrain, Josh gathered his squad. "Listen up," he called, his voice steady. "Today, we fought not just for ourselves, but for everyone back on Earth and for the civilians we swore to protect. You've all done incredible work, and I'm proud of each and every one of you." A murmur of agreement swept through the group, their faces illuminated by a mix of fatigue and triumph. The bond they shared was palpable, forged in the fires of battle and strengthened by shared purpose. "We need to regroup, assess our losses, and plan our next move," Josh continued. "But first, let's take a moment to honor those we lost today." They formed a circle, heads bowed in solemn remembrance. Josh thought of his fallen comrades, their laughter, their dreams, their determination. They had fought bravely, and he vowed to carry their spirits with him as they moved forward. After the memorial, Velith joined Josh, her expression thoughtful. "You handled that well," she said, her eyes shining with respect. "Your leadership is commendable." "Thanks, Velith," Josh replied, feeling the weight of her words. "But we can't rest on our laurels. This battle was just one in a larger war. We need to find out what the Jorek are planning next." Velith nodded in agreement, her gaze shifting toward the horizon where the last remnants of the enemy were retreating. "We need intelligence. If we can discover their next move, we can prevent further bloodshed." With that goal in mind, they returned to the makeshift command center set up by the remaining human forces. The air was tense with urgency as soldiers and strategists worked diligently, analyzing data and piecing together the fragments of intelligence gleaned from the battlefield. "Josh, Velith," Sergeant Harper called, waving them over to a holographic display showing the layout of the battlefield. "You'll want to see this." The two hurried over, peering at the glowing map. Harper tapped a few commands, bringing up real-time data. "We managed to capture one of the Jorek's communication devices during the fight. It's been analyzing their transmissions." Velith's eyes widened as she studied the screen. This could be invaluable. We might uncover their plans and objectives. Josh leaned closer, excitement bubbling within him. "What have you found?" Harper adjusted the parameters, filtering through the information. "It seems like the Jorek are mobilizing for a larger offensive. They're rallying forces from neighboring systems, possibly even calling on allies." "Great," Josh muttered, frustration creeping into his tone. "So they plan to hit us harder next time." "Not just us," Velith interjected, her expression grave. "If they are calling on allies, it could mean a coalition of forces against humanity and its supporters. We must alert our command and prepare for a coordinated defense." The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on them all. The war was escalating, and the fragile alliance they had forged with the Xalari would need to be solidified further. They would need to strategize and build more robust defenses to ensure the survival of both their people and the fragile coalition that had begun to form. "Let's gather the squad," Josh said, determination igniting in his chest. "We need everyone on board. We can't afford any surprises." As they regrouped, Josh shared the intelligence gathered, outlining their next steps. "We need to fortify our defenses and prepare for a counteroffensive. I want us to train together, humans and Xalari, and learn from each other's strengths." A chorus of agreement erupted from the soldiers, their spirits buoyed by Josh's conviction. They all understood that the path ahead would not be easy, but they were prepared to face the challenge together. Over the next few days, the camp buzzed with activity. The soldiers worked tirelessly, constructing defensive fortifications and refining their combat strategies. Veleth's presence among them bridged the gap between species. She taught them to harness Solari technology, sharing techniques to amplify their strength and improve coordination in combat. Under Veleth's guidance, they developed makeshift energy shields that could absorb incoming fire, allowing human soldiers to fight alongside their alien counterparts with newfound confidence. The training sessions were intense, pushing everyone beyond their limits, but there was laughter too, camaraderie forming as they learned and grew together. Josh found himself spending more time with Veleth, their bond deepening as they shared stories and insights. He learned about her homeworld, the struggles that Solari faced, and the principles that guided their actions. They exchanged ideas on combat, technology, and strategy, realizing that their differences were a source of strength rather than division. One evening, as they stood together looking out at the camp, Veleth turned to Josh, her expression serious. "I see the determination in your eyes, Sergeant, but I also sense a heavy burden. You carry the weight of many lives on your shoulders." Josh sighed, his gaze lingering on the horizon. "It's hard not to. So many have already suffered, and I'm terrified of what's coming. I don't want to let anyone down." Veleth placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "You're not alone in this fight. Your squad is behind you, and so am I. We are all in this together. Remember, strength is not just in physical power, but in the connections we forge." Her words resonated deeply within him. It was true. He had found allies in unexpected places, and together they formed a formidable force. "Thank you, Veleth. Your support means more than you know." As the sun set behind the mountains, casting a warm glow over the camp, Josh felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. They were stronger together, and they would face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and resilience. Days turned into weeks as preparations continued. Tensions mounted, and the air was thick with anticipation. The threat of an impending Jorek offensive loomed large, and the coalition of humans and Solari prepared to defend their position. Then, one fateful morning, the alarm bells rang throughout the camp, shattering the uneasy peace. Soldiers scrambled, adrenaline coursing through their veins as they rushed to their stations. Josh felt the familiar surge of energy as he donned his armor, determination set in his eyes. "Fallon, we've spotted Jorek forces on the move." Harper shouted, urgency in his voice. "They're closing in fast." Josh took a deep breath, centering himself. "Prepare the defenses. We hold the line here today." As they rushed into position, Veleth moved beside him, her demeanor calm and focused. "Remember what we practiced. We can use the energy shields to cover our flanks." "Right," Josh replied, his heart racing. "Let's show them what we've got." The ground trembled as the Jorek forces approached, their war machines rolling forward like dark thunderclouds. The time had come to put their training and alliance to the test. As the first wave of alien soldiers charged, Josh felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a battle for their future, a testament to the strength that lay in unity. Together, they would face the darkness, ready to forge their path forward in a galaxy fraught with uncertainty. The battle for Yuvara Prime. The alarm blared through the camp like a war horn, cutting through the chaos and galvanizing the soldiers into action. Josh's heart raced as he grabbed his weapon, adrenaline surging through him. The Jorek forces were approaching fast, a dark tide of alien soldiers and towering war machines intent on obliterating everything in their path. "Positions," he shouted, rallying his squad. They had trained tirelessly for this moment, and now they had to put their skills to the test. As they moved into formation, Josh caught a glimpse of Veleth, her expression calm and resolute. She had become a beacon of strength, and he felt the weight of their partnership settle firmly on his shoulders. Remember what we practiced, Josh called, his voice steadying the group. Stay focused, trust your training, and support one another. The ground shook as the first wave of Zorak's soldiers emerged from the smoke, their grotesque forms silhouetted against a fiery backdrop. They charged forward, shrieks and war cries filling the air. But this time, Josh felt different. The training, the bond with Velith, the unity within the squad, it all coalesced into a powerful resolve that coursed through him like electricity. Energy shields up, Velith commanded, her voice slicing through the din. With a flick of her wrist, she activated the glowing technology, creating translucent barriers that shimmered in the air. The soldiers moved behind the shields, bracing themselves for the onslaught. As the first wave of alien soldiers collided with their defenses, Josh felt the impact reverberate through his body. The Zorak were relentless, their strikes fierce and unyielding. But the barriers held, absorbing the brunt of the attacks, allowing Josh and his squad to retaliate. "Open fire," Josh shouted, unleashing a barrage of plasma shots at the oncoming horde. The air crackled with energy as human and Solari weapons discharged in unison, illuminating the battlefield with flashes of light. One by one, the Zorak fell, but for every enemy taken down, 2 more surged forward. Josh could see the grim determination on the faces of his squad members. They were fighting for their lives, for their fallen comrades, and for a future that hung in the balance. But then came the towering war machines, massive constructs of metal and energy that advanced like predatory beasts. Josh's heart sank as he watched one of the machines lock onto their position, its weapons primed to fire. "Get down," he shouted, diving for cover as a deafening blast erupted from the war machine, sending a shockwave through the camp. Velith, ever the strategist, moved swiftly beside him. "We need to disable those machines. They're too powerful to take head-on." "Right," Josh responded, adrenaline sharpening his focus. "I'll draw its fire again. You find a way to disrupt its systems." He rose from his cover, heart pounding, and sprinted toward the war machine. As it trained its weapons on him, he could feel the heat of its energy beam building, but he wouldn't back down. With a swift movement, he unleashed a powerful blast of energy, aimed at the machine's leg joints, hoping to destabilize it. The shot landed, sending sparks flying, but the machine remained standing, unfazed by his assault. It fired back, and Josh narrowly dodged the beam, feeling the heat singe his arm as he leaped behind a nearby debris pile. "Velith, now," he yelled, urging her on. Velith was already in motion, her hands weaving intricate patterns in the air. "I'll overload its systems. Keep it distracted." Josh kept firing, maintaining the machine's attention while Velith worked her magic. He could see her energy building, a brilliant glow surrounding her hands as she prepared to unleash her powers. In that moment, time seemed to stretch. Josh could feel the world around him, every heartbeat, every breath. The sounds of battle faded into the background, leaving only the steady rhythm of his resolve. "Almost there," Velith called, her voice rising above the chaos. The war machine fired again, but Josh was ready. He ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the blast. As he came to his feet, he saw Velith's energy surge toward the machine, striking its core with an explosive force. The machine shuddered, sparks flying from its chassis, and for a moment it seemed to falter. "Now, Josh, finish it," Velith commanded, her energy radiating in waves. Seizing the opportunity, Josh charged forward, tapping into the strength he had gained through his training. He leaped onto the war machine, his feet landing solidly on its hull as he scrambled for a weak point, the interface that connected its weapons to its control systems. With determination, he plunged his plasma blade into the crack, forcing it deeper as alarms blared around him. He could feel the vibrations of the machinery beneath him, a powerful heartbeat ready to be extinguished. With one final push, he triggered an overload, sending a pulse of energy through the core. The war machine erupted in a blinding flash, the explosion sending shockwaves through the air as Josh was thrown backward. He landed hard, but the sight of the war machine crumbling brought a surge of triumph. They had done it. "Keep pushing forward," he shouted to his squad, adrenaline propelling him back to his feet. The momentum shifted, and they pressed the attack, exploiting the confusion that had spread among the remaining Jorak soldiers. As they fought, the sound of a horn blared from the enemy ranks, signaling a retreat. The Jorak, realizing the tide of battle had turned, began to fall back, their once fearsome advance now crumbling under the weight of human resilience and Solari ingenuity. But just as Josh felt a rush of victory, he noticed movement on the periphery, a group of elite Jorak warriors flanking his position. They were larger, faster, and clearly more deadly than their regular counterparts. "Josh, behind you." Veleth's voice cut through the chaos, but it was too late. The elite warriors charged, their weapons crackling with energy. Josh turned just in time to meet the first attack, barely deflecting a strike aimed at his head. He engaged in a fierce melee, trading blows with the alien warrior. Josh could feel the adrenaline surging through him, but these opponents were unlike anything he had faced. They fought with an agility and ferocity that pushed him to his limits. He had to remember Veleth's words: strength lay not just in power but in control. "Fallon," Harper shouted, trying to reach him through the chaos. "We need to regroup. We can't let them surround us." "I can handle this," Josh replied, gritting his teeth as he dodged another strike. But just as he felt he had gained the upper hand, a second elite warrior joined the fray, forcing him back. Veleth stepped in, her energy flaring as she created a barrier between Josh and the attackers. "You can't take them on alone. We need a plan." Josh nodded, adrenaline coursing through him. "Let's draw them into the open. We can use the shields to our advantage." As they coordinated their movements, they led the elite warriors into the clearing, where their combined powers would have the best chance of overcoming the threat. The rest of the squad joined them, forming a line of defense as they prepared for the next onslaught. The elite warriors charged again, but this time Josh and Veleth were ready. With a synchronized effort, they unleashed their powers, creating a wall of energy that struck the Jorak like a tidal wave. The aliens reeled, momentarily disoriented. "Now," Josh yelled, springing into action. He lunged forward, targeting the closest elite warrior, channeling all his strength into a decisive blow. The impact sent the creature crashing to the ground, its weapon clattering away. Veleth followed suit, her energy striking the second warrior with a force that sent it sprawling. They had found their rhythm, moving as one, the bond between them solidifying in the heat of battle. As the last of the elite warriors fell, Josh turned to his squad, their faces lit with exhilaration. "We did it. Together." Cheers erupted around him, the weight of their earlier losses momentarily forgotten in the thrill of victory. But Josh knew better than to let his guard down. The battle was far from over. As they regrouped, Harper approached, his expression a mix of relief and determination. "What's the plan now, Fallon? We can't let the remaining Jorak regroup." "We push forward," Josh declared, his voice steady. "If we can disrupt their command structure, we might be able to end this conflict before it escalates further." Veleth nodded, her eyes shining with conviction. "I can help us locate their command center. If we strike there, we can turn the tide in our favor." With renewed purpose, the group prepared to move. They had become a cohesive unit, a force that transcended their differences. The bond between human and Solari had forged a new path, one that promised hope amidst the darkness. As they set off toward the enemy's command, Josh felt a fire igniting within him. They were warriors now, united in purpose and strength. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead.